Well, my body lies over the ocean. My body lies over the sea. Ooh, my body lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my body to me.
Hello, Camp Pros. This is Travis Allison from camphacker.tv. I'm excited to be here with you on the Scott Arizala show and excited to introduce you to Scott himself. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Travis. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic and excited about today's topic.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about training for trainers. I don't think we talk about this enough. We do a lot of leadership work with a lot of our young people. I've got some things to say about that, but we'll save that for another episode. One of the things that I want to make sure that we're doing, though, especially for those of us who run maybe bigger camps that are having our young people or maybe some of our returning staff run some training, is or even set the training up, is I want to talk about training for trainers. What are some of the ideas that we need to sort of put into making a really great training experience, whether that's a couple of hours, a couple of days, or a couple of weeks. I think there's a lot that sort of needs to go into it. And I sort of wanted to start by giving you all this example. So I'm going to ask everybody who's watching right now to close your eyes. And I want you to try to visualize this as we go. So you're going to take your piece of paper, you're going to fold it in half. You're going to unfold it and take the top right corner and fold it down. You're going to take then the top left corner and fold it down. You're going to refold the whole thing in half. You're going to take one side and fold it out, matching the edges. You're going to flip it over and take the other side and fold it out and match the edges. Now, Travis, I know you were closing your eyes because I'm watching you. What was it that we just made?
We made a paper airplane.
We made a paper airplane. Now, what's so funny about the asking that question is you're probably a little bit more of a visual thinker. When I'm doing that in front of a whole big group, I would say 75% of the people will say a paper airplane. There are about 25% of the people who have no idea what it is that we just made together. And then here's what I do, and I would love for anybody watching to do this with your staff. Actually give them a piece of paper, and instead of closing your eyes and just visualizing it, just say the words and have them do it. And what's fascinating is that people, when they hold up their planes, almost none of them look the same, right? They all look different, and some of them will have not folded the way that you were thinking for them to fold it, and it won't look like a plane at all. And then you can do it right in front of them, and you can say, okay, take your piece of paper, and you can like turn around so that everyone is seeing it, and say, okay, now fold it in half, yep, just like this, right? And you can show them how to do it. And then virtually everybody, 99% of the folks, will have the same paper. Again, not everybody, which is even a different conversation to have, but almost everybody will have it. And the reason why I use that example a lot is because, look, at the end of the day, a lot of what training is us deliver all of training. I mean, I could basically make the case that staff training can come down to sort of one word. What are we doing? It's expectations. Everything around what you're doing is like delivering some sort of expectation. So much of that can be just me saying it to you. It can be just me being like, I expect you to do this when it comes to working with kids, or this when it comes to running a sailing program, or this when it comes to working with a kid who's homesick. Right? Yet, when I just say things out loud, it doesn't matter how clear I am. It doesn't matter what the vision is in my head. Oftentimes, it's not coming across the right way or as clear as I want it to be. And even for people like you, Travis, who know what I'm talking about, who can see what I'm talking about, your plane in your head probably looks different than my plane in my head. And that's not what we want when we're delivering staff training. So the idea is, how can we get more experiential, more hands-on, more clarity involved instead of just trying to tell people what we expect.
And the other thing I find about that exercise, what goes through my brain as I'm listening to you and doing the exercise in my head is, is Scott expecting me at this point to follow his instructions exactly, or to not make the assumption, or is Scott expecting me to end up with a paper airplane as a product? So what's the goal of the exercise? And that opens up so many points of discussion, I think, as you're training trainers.
Yeah, well, and isn't that the perfect example of what many staff would say sitting in your homesickness session, right? Like, yo, this is my third year being a counselor here. I totally know what I'm doing. I had that crazy homesick kid last year. Yeah, whatever it is you say, but I know writing a letter home totally works. Boom. I'm the best person, you know what I mean? And it's like, we make that same assumption all the time. You know, as professionals, we make that assumption. As young people make that assumption. So that's a great point to bring up. And again, it's about delivering some of these messages as clearly as we can, and then also sort of broadening the experiential approach, or the experience that people are having, so that they feel like they have sort of more tools at their disposal.
And when you sit down with this group of people, Scott, and you're ready to get going, do you bring certain goals to that moment?
Absolutely. So, you know, there's a case to be made for, instead of just taking out your training schedule from last year and saying, okay, I liked this, I didn't like this, let's change this, let's move this around. Boom, there's staff training for this year. There's a case to be made for starting the process a lot earlier and really taking a look at what are your goals, what are your objectives, you know, what's sort of mandatory based on, you know, ACA or health department or state or national laws. What do I think is important, and sort of building out your sort of content based on some objectives and goals that you have. But once you get sort of past that point to say, okay, here's sort of the body of content that I want to deliver during my 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, 1 week of training, whatever it is, then I think the idea of goals comes down to this. In your individual sort of content sessions, and everybody does this really differently, and we're going to go in a minute, we're going to kind of talk through what I think is some of the best ways to sort of set up or facilitate the training period. But in your individual sort of content pieces, there are sort of three goals that I want you to think about. And I got these from a guy named Dr. Randall Grayson. He published a bunch of material on staff training a long time ago. I mean, this is maybe better part of 20 years ago now. Not to date Randall, Dr. Grayson at all, but this man is brilliant. And, you know, my suggestion would be to read anything that he puts out. At any rate, he once said that staff training comes down to three things. What do I want them to know? What do I want them to do, or how do I want them to behave is another way to say that one, and what's their attitude about it, or what's their emotional buy-in to it, right? And with each sort of piece of content, if you can answer those three questions, you're going to be able to deliver something really meaningful in that 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever the sort of piece of content is. If you're thinking to yourself, what do I want every single staff person to know about what it is that I'm saying? What do I want them to do, or how do I want them to behave because of what I'm saying? And what's the buy-in? Why is this important in their lives as a camp counselor?
And so knowledge, attitude, and behavior were those three things.
And attitude is the hardest one. Attitude because there's so many things during the week or during the days of training that it's easy for staff members to go, what does this have to do with me and my job working with kids? And so the buy-in to why this is important, you have to stay on top of that. I mean, sometimes it's easy, it might be a hard piece of content, but it's easy to relate in that way, like your child abuse sessions, right? That's really tough content for people to get through. It's uncomfortable. Our staff don't like it, whatever. It's not a session that you can make like fun and interactive in any kind of way, right? I mean, it's just hard. Yet the emotional buy-in on that one's pretty easy, right? It's like, well, if you look at the statistics, 3 of the 8 kids in your cabin have been abused in their past. So this is really important stuff for you to know. Our job is to keep them safe and help them. And so the emotional buy-in there is real easy. The emotional buy-in on your policies and procedures around how you do your laundry and how you get your mail and how you get paid is not necessarily easy to get an emotional buy-in piece on.
So is there a certain way that you teach them then to build a program so that all of those 3 elements come together?
Yeah, so I think there's 4 pieces to a really great experiential approach to training, and I think one of them is the schedule. I've seen so many people, to be honest, waste time in staff training trying to teach people how the daily schedule works, when you could just be using the daily schedule.
Yes, you could just do it.
You just do it. Don't try to teach it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are moments in the schedule when you're transitioning a group of kids from here to there, and you've got to avoid the construction or whatever it is that, of course, you're going to have to talk through. Don't get me wrong. I would rather, if you're going to use that example, I'd rather you actually move the group of staff from point A to point B, avoiding the construction, and then spending 30 seconds being like, did you all notice how we didn't use that main path? Because there's a bulldozer over there? Yeah, so we're going to have to do that during, you know what I mean? I think there are ways to do just about everything experientially. But the point is that if we want our young people, our staff, to know what it's like to move from thing to thing to thing all day long at the sort of harried pace that most camps operate on. I want you during training to move them in that kind of way. And I've had a lot of pushback on this, Travis. I've had people tell me that, yeah, but my activity periods at camp are only 45 minutes. And there are certainly lots of training sessions that are double that, triple that, because of just the amount of information we've got to give. And, you know, our child abuse or our emergency procedures, those are really important sessions. I can't just cut them to 45 minutes. And I say, absolutely, don't cut them to 45 minutes if you need an hour and a half to do them. But here's what I'd like you to do. Do a part 1, a part 2, and a part 3. Do a 45 minutes here, transition to another part of camp, do part 2 over there, transition to another part of camp, do part 3 over there. That, I think, is a better way to use your time. 1, it's better teaching, right? I mean, you're getting people up and moving. 2, it's how you operate on camp. I mean, I will tell you that, you know, a couple of episodes ago, you brought up our good friend Dan Weir at Frost Valley YMCA. When I was a camp director there, this is how we were doing a lot of training. We were just sort of talking through it. And then what I found after my first summer is that some people in my lodges that were the farthest away from the waterfront, happened to be our youngest kids, were getting shorted at the waterfront because by the time they would get there, they only had 15 minutes to swim. And it was just making me crazy. Because 8-year-olds, that's like their favorite thing to do is go swimming, right? And so, you know, I went crazy. And what I realized was they never figured out until halfway through first or maybe even second session how long it takes to get 28-year-olds changed all the way from one lodge all the way down to the waterfront. And what they started to do is they started to sort of cut some of the other programming so that they could have a full waterfront. So what did we do? We changed the training the next year so that when we were doing, let's say, waterfront procedures or our swim test or whatever, we actually ran it the same way in the schedule. So those same counselors had to go all the way up to their lodge, change their clothes, and get down. Of course, what were they? They were probably 10 minutes late to the swim test. And then we were able to debrief right there. Well, it's just 8 adults. And it took you guys were 15 minutes late. Now add 38-year-olds to that and imagine what's going to happen, right? And people were like, whoa, right? You know, it's like maybe we should get them changed at cabin cleanup in the morning so we don't even have to go back to the lodge. Or maybe we should bring everything with us and try to change in, you know, in the old dining hall, in the bathrooms or whatever, you know. And they kind of worked it out. And that was because of just an experience, using the schedule in our training.
Do you want to just quickly, Scott, tell us the 3 other pieces to that? And we'll leave them wanting more. We'll come back around to those 3 pieces.
The second piece is facility. Using your facility the way it was meant to be used. You know, I can't tell you, Travis, how many times I've been to a camp and they're running training and they have all 200 people sitting on the floor in their dining hall for 3 hours listening to me talk or whoever. And I always say to the camp director, do you ever have all, 500 of your people at camp sitting on the dining hall floor for 3 hours? And they always say no. I said, well, why do you do it to your staff then? And I want us to use the facility the way it's meant to be used. So sit them on the tables in the dining hall if you're going to do a session in there. If you're going to talk about the health center, the health center process and procedure, take them to the health center. Do it in the health center. Yeah, but it doesn't fit everybody. Fine. Do it in 5 different times with 5 small groups. If you're going to go to, if you're going to talk about how you run arts and crafts, do it at arts and crafts. All those kinds of things. So using the facility the way it was meant to be used. The culture of camp. This is one of the hardest things to teach. So this is one of the things that I want from the very beginning for you to be conscious about how you're teaching and what you're teaching. Don't just sing songs because that's what we do at the end of lunch, right? Be intentional about it. Talk about, well, at the end of every lunch we sing songs. Here are the 5 songs that we're going to learn right now. Really be intentional about the cultural aspects of your camp and choose 5 that are important and hammer those away all through training. And I will tell you right now, as long as you have a 10% or more of returning staff, there's going to be a lot that then gets sort of translated from one year to the next, actually whether you like it or not, whether it's good culture or bad culture, right, from one year to the next, that stuff will get translated vis-a-vis those returning staff members. So pick 4 or 5 things that you really want to hammer away on and be really intentional and clear about how you're teaching the cultural piece. And then finally, the basics of camp. A lot of people miss this during training, right? I want us to be very clear about all the things that are important to people, particularly in the first few moments, but we need to start paying attention to them because we're going to ask our young people, our staff, to do the same thing for kids, which is this. I want them to know where their stuff belongs. I want them to know when and where they're going to eat. I want them to know when and where they can go to the bathroom. I want them to know when they can take a shower. I want them to know when they can wash their clothes, where they can wash their clothes. All the sort of daily living things that are important, I want you to be clear and conscious about teaching those things so that when we in turn can say, how do you help make kids comfortable in the first 24 hours of camp, they're going to go be like, oh, well, when we go to the dining hall, we're going to point out where the bathroom is because it's not obvious. And then we're going to have a kid who needs to go to the bathroom and not know where to go, so on and so forth. So those are the other pieces of an experiential model that I think are really important.
So thank you, Scott, for giving us so much insight into how to train our staff who are then going to be training our staff below them. That's great. If you're watching now on YouTube, we hope that if you are a fan or have read Dr. Randall Grayson's stuff, I hope you give us a thumbs up for mentioning him. But everybody else, I hope that you'll also click subscribe below this video, and so that just so you can get the rest of the Scott Arizala show as it comes out. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Travis Allison from camphacker.tv.
Yes, thank you all so much for tuning in. My name is Scott Arizala. If you want to find out more about what I do, you can check out my website at thecampcounselor.com. You can also check out my new subscription service. It's a staff training resource called the Camp Counselor Insider, where you'll be able to find MP3s of Season 1 of the Scott Arizala Show. So check that out. It's thecampcounselor.com/insider. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching, and we'll see you next summer.
Well, my body